Good evening. The hour being 6:50. I'd like to open the June 9th school committee meeting. The first order of business is that, as tradition, the superintendent of schools conducts the initial business of the reorganization of school committee. So I'll ask for a nomination for a chairperson for the 2022-2023 school year.
Through you, Madam Chair, I make a motion to nominate current Vice Chair Kristen Wilson-Syrek as Chair of the School Committee.
Second.
We have a second? Mm-hmm. Carrie? Any discussion?
Just want to make a comment. I'm grateful for Kristen being nominated. I think that's excellent for the group and for the community. One of the things that I like to see on any board is a diversity of leadership and the opportunity to raise up leaders. In my short time here as a committee member, but also as a parent, it's evident that Kristen cares. She's involved. She's a strong leader, involving people, and I'm excited that she has this opportunity.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yeah, another.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Buckley, a second by Ms. Syrek. All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? All right, it is unanimous. Well, that's about it for me. So at this point, I relinquish the proverbial gavel and to the newly elected chairperson, Kristen Syrek.
Thank you. So my first order of business is to entertain nominations for vice chair. Let's do it to you.
At some point, we may want to pause and do the pledge.
Oh, we haven't done the pledge. Oh, correct.
See what happened with my first order of business?
We can.
No, we weren't going to correct you.
part
So.
first, maybe,
Yeah,
and
let's
then
do this first.
transition
Okay.
to I would like to make a motion for Ms. Nancy Gallivan to continue in the role of vice chair for the 2022-23 year.
Second.
Any discussion, comments? All those in favor? Passes 6-0-0. Okay, and so our second order of business, we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the third order of business is recognition. And today we have the speech and debate team who did a really great job, we here at the national tournament, Memorial Day weekend. Dr. Goff?
Sure, we have Erin Ledwith, and I know Samira Manikar is, could not be here, correct? And Bridget Ryan, but I see Stephen Bond. Hi, Stephen. Of the speech and debate team, and they did an unbelievable job. I don't want to take up your thunder. Coach Emily Murray is present to just talk about where you went and how it went. And
Sure. I'm going to let the students speak since they are so excited to speak, and then if they missed anything, I'll just fill it in at the end. So I'd like to introduce graduate now, Erin Ledwith, who is acted as our speech vice president this year, and she attended the NCFL tournament with Stephen and the other two students. And she's also competing at the NSDA National Tournament next week in Louisville, Kentucky. So she is our first student of Walpole to qualify for both national speech and debate tournaments. So she's not done yet. So Erin is gonna speak, and then we'll move on to Stephen.
Well, first, I just want to say congratulations to Stephen, Bridget, and Samira. I truly love and appreciate every one of them and everyone on the speech team. They really are like a second family to me, and I'm so glad to have been on the speech team for my 4 years in high school. At NCFL, we saw a lot of sites. We went to the National Mall. We visited a lot of restaurants, some small, some like franchise, but and we just overall had a great time in our hotel, and we also connected with so many other students from around the country. I made so many new friends, and I don't think that would have been possible if I hadn't gone to the NCFL tournament. And I was so glad to have been able to see so many other wonderful duos. That was our event that we did. And Yes, on a personal note, I'm going to the NSDA tournament next week, and that is very exciting. I'm competing in dramatic interpretation and storytelling. And overall, I really can't thank Miss Murray enough for taking me on this trip. It really was one of my favorite trips I have ever been on, and I really hope that some other students get to experience it because it just was so much fun. Thank you. And may I be excused? I have to go to the high school.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Erin?
Erin is the MC of tonight's cabaret performance at the high school, which starts at 7:30, so she's going to head out. But thank you, Erin, and thank you to the family.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And I'm sure some of you saw her or heard her speak at graduation and can
Excellent.
attest that she's an incredible speaker and an actress as well. And that's what speech is. A lot of people think, oh yeah, speech, it's all speeches, right? And that is true, but speech, I call it competitive acting. And me being a theater major in college and a theater person my whole life, that's what really my expertise is. So now I'm gonna introduce our now current speech president, Stephen Bond.
Hi, my name's Stephen Bond. I'm a junior at the Walpole High School right now, but I'm going into my senior year. I just wanted to say thank you for the recognition, and I would just like to say this experience was indescribable. It was an amazing chance to represent the town of Walpole to the whole country. Together, me and my duo partner, Bridget Ryan, who sadly could not be here today, went against 150 other groups in duo interpretation. And we went through 4 preliminary rounds, an octofinals round, a quarterfinals round, and finally we ended with a semifinals round where we placed in the top 10. And basically, like, our goals for next year are to maybe possibly attend more of these national tournaments with greater numbers from our group, and hopefully like grow closer as a team together. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Stephen has to go as well. He has work, I think. So thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, he's also in the cabaret. As you can see,
Excellent.
Very
drama,
involved.
speech, film festival,
Nice
they do all
job.
of it. And Mike Allen and I are going to try to do more stuff actually together with both groups, because I think when you see the speech kids on the in the films, they have the best articulation, and you know they really it goes hand in hand, especially with the cabaret. But like Stephen said, duo interpretation is an event where 2 people act out a script or a story, and only certain cities can qualify a certain number of students based on how many schools are in that diocese. So Boston was able to qualify 6 duos. And so the duo of Aaron and Samira and Stephen and Bridget were among the top 6. They competed against Catholic Memorial, Needham, Newton South, a bunch of other schools in the Boston area. And so they were the top 6 students that were able to go. So it was a huge honor just to qualify. And then Erin, actually for next week, she's one of 3 students in Massachusetts to represent our state in dramatic interpretation. So we wish her good luck. And yeah, so that's kind of in a nutshell what we've been doing.
Excellent. Any questions or comments for Coach Murray? Sean?
It's a comment, a parent of a student that's participated in the speech and debate program this year, and it's really been fantastic. You know, as a freshman, you can probably tell from the 2 leaders that were here that they're very inviting, welcoming, and warm and supportive. And to have a program like that for our students to help them, you know, as a freshman, acclimate in and be encouraged through, you know, some growing pains and some struggles, figuring stuff out, has just been really awesome. So I'm grateful for that, and any time we get to see students achieving on a national level, I think that's amazing. I think that's a thread that's been through, whether it's some of the music or robotics team. You know, we have some strong programs that are leading to some students really having the opportunity to excel throughout the clubs and activities at the high school, which is amazing.
Thank you so much. And yes, I have Kayla, his freshman daughter, on the team. And I want to thank you for judging, because Sean saw it firsthand, the long day, what it's like. And we're always looking for judges. So anybody who wants to judge, you know, it's a long day, but it's worthwhile, as you can see. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep, positive experience. It's
Yeah,
good.
definitely, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Very good.
Thank you very much, Coach Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great
Thank you
job.
for having us. We really appreciate the recognition.
Pretty amazing.
Thank you.
care.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next order of business is the Walpole High School Student Report, and today we have Colin Mahoney. Go ahead, Colin.
Good evening. I am Colin Mahoney, and I'm a sophomore at Walpole High School. Walpole seniors in the class of 2022 graduated this past Sunday and had a parade around the town to celebrate their achievements. Congratulations to all who graduated. As for sports at the high school, the spring sports season is wrapping up and teams are gearing up for playoffs. Also, there was a unified track state championship meet in which many Walpole athletes represented their town excellently and placed in many events. There was also an informational meeting for incoming freshman athletes and their parents in regards to fall sports this Tuesday. To finish the year off, Student Council is holding semi-formal dances for both the sophomore and freshman class this upcoming weekend. And finally, the summer program brochure for summer classes has been released to families, and parents can now sign their children up for summer classes. That's all. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Colin? All right, take care.
4.5 more days, Colin, right?
Well, and yeah, tomorrow too.
We'll have a wonderful summer. Thanks for being with us this year. We look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate it. Okay. Yes, so we have Brian Jarvis here, who is going to give us an update on the building projects. So if we can, the body okay with moving Mr. Jarvis up in the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As the presentation for the high school, do you want me to give a brief update on the middle school as well, or
Oh, yeah, if you want to do.
bonus?
Sure.
Sure. I don't have visuals for that.
Excellent.
He's already has a first name.
Can I see it on this one too?
That'd be too easy.
We'll start, we'll do the high school first, then we do the middle school. Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so quick update on the high school feasibility study for those of you looking for some information. Do a quick overview on the general timeline, some programming priorities that were identified. Preliminary budget that we're working under. The approach of the feasibility study, what TAPE Architects is looking to do. And then some preliminary concepts that were shared with the working group as of last Thursday, so kind of hot off the press. And then talk a little bit about what the next steps are. So next slide. That's good. So what you see here is a preliminary timeline for the feasibility and then potentially a design phase. Currently we're where the red line is, just starting June. And the first half of the project, the first half of this slide is really the feasibility phase, and that started with a kickoff and some visioning with the administration and staff, the design consultants. They moved into programming. TAPE consultants met with all of the different departments at the high school, the administration at the high school, district administration, to really study the needs analysis and kind of tie that back to the programming priorities that were issued in the RFQs and the RFSs for the designer. They then started putting all those programming analysis into kind of a set of concepts that they're starting to develop, and they also did a thorough assessment of the existing conditions of the high school, and we'll get into that a little bit. And then the goal is really to have all that information to start to churn out some options starting this month, and we'll see the ones that they talked about last week. And the goal is to kind of come up with a whole list of options that the district can then evaluate, school committee can then evaluate, and determine which ones might meet the needs based on the preliminary budget that we have. The goal would then be able to potentially narrow that down to a preferred solution sometime this fall to potentially be ready to ask for funding to maybe get into a design phase to then take that preferred solution through a full design to potentially get to a bid scenario or something like that. So this really represents maybe a best case scenario, is everything just moved in a linear fashion. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts and funding and things all need to happen, but if everything kind of happened on a sequential order, this is where you'd end up to get a full design and bid in hand sometimes toward the end of next year. So some of the program priorities that were identified in the RFS and RFQ for the designer and the OPM, as well as that came out of the visioning sessions with the designer and the staff and administration. I'll go through a couple of these. I think most of these you probably know, having been through the high school. Educational / architectural. So educational needs, how do you meet that architecturally or with spaces? Support an innovative curriculum both now and in the future, so spaces that are flexible, accessible, collaborative type spaces that could be used for a lot of different programming needs. Focus on the science and STEM or STEAM, however you want to look at it. District IT areas, some robust technology type offerings. Career, technical, project-based learning spaces. Better access to natural lights. That's really an architectural thing, but there's a lot of interior rooms that aren't necessarily kind of up to modern standards for classroom learning. Enhanced student services, service spaces, counseling, guidance, nurses suite, etc. Ease the circulation within the building. There's a lot of narrow corridors and hallways. Enhance music, performing arts, and enhance athletic fitness type areas. From a community perspective, some of the things that came up: safe and secure access to the building, both for families, younger students that might be getting into the high school to experience some of that programming, as well as community access, both during the school day if needed and obviously after hours. Athletic facilities, maybe with separate entrances that are a little bit easier to maintain, that could potentially host non-Walpole events or regional or playoff type events. Walpole media access, where they might have a separate entrance as well, again, for those after hours or community entrance. And obviously better parking and general circulation for the parking lot in general, and then entrances and exits of the site. So a lot of programs. Obviously you can't address all of those without taking on a much larger project. So the preliminary budget target that we were kind of given as a conceptual budget of something to try to work with was a $30 million number. Like, what could we do for $30 million? And the way that we approached it is we started with that number, and we can start to back out some of the factors you have to consider, getting back to how could you maximize what you have available to actually do construction work. So starting with $30 million, project management fees are typically 4 to 5% of that, which would include on-site management during a construction project. Designers fees, just kind of a starting point, 10%, could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. And administrative and other costs, those are things that pop up from the town or district's perspective during the project all the way through construction. Furniture and technology, we put a pretty healthy budget in there of $1 million, because some of the solutions might be kind of new furniture type solutions, flexible furniture, technology for certain spaces, et cetera. And then obviously contingencies during construction. And when you back all of those out, you're left with about $24 million for actual construction. So the goal then from TAP A Architects is, okay, what can we do for around that number? So the approach that they're taking is they assessed all the existing conditions, the current quantity, number of spaces, size of spaces in the high school, the existing conditions of those spaces, the adjacencies of spaces. Are they grouped together? Are they far apart? What's some of the circulation patterns in the school? The existing mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, fire alarm, security. You have to think about that if you're renovating or adding to it. How do you tie into those things? Can they support additional square footage? Structural considerations and hazardous material considerations. They did all those studies earlier this spring. They grouped all that information together, so they have a pretty good understanding of the existing high school, and obviously having recently done a project there, relatively speaking, they had some existing plans that were very helpful. The next step would be to create, and this is what they started to do late last month and early this month, is start to think about potential space concepts of how you could address some of those programming needs, whether it's physical space changes, physical space additions, renovations, and or just improvements, again, using use of furniture and maybe enhancing some of the spaces that you currently have. Identify some of the conceptual costs and time requirements with those concepts, and that's what they're just starting to do now. We'll see an example shortly. And then the goal would be to kind of come up with a menu of all those concepts to start saying, okay, well, we can pick and choose these potential concepts to kind of group them together into maybe options that work, that fit the budget, that meet the needs, that the highest priority needs. Prioritize those options then to what most cost effectively address those programming requirements. And then also keeping in mind having a bigger vision, because with a potentially limited budget and with a lot of programming needs, you might not get it all at the first phase, but you don't want to paint yourself into a corner by, hey, we did this and addressed this need, but now we can't do something else later on down the line. You want to have that plan of, maybe this is the first phase and there's something 5 years later as the budget allows, or so on and so forth. So a lot of moving parts. So that got us really to the middle of April, end of April. May, they started to kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, how does this look in the physical space? And one of the concepts, I'm sorry, next. I thought they advanced the slides. Yeah, right there, perfect. Next slide. One more with the drawings. So one of the first ideas that popped out, you got one more there? Oh, should be attached. Oh, is there a PDF version of it? The PDF had more slides, I'm sorry. Yep. So while Mary's pulling it up, one of the first concepts that came out of that was potentially looking at the gym space, because the gym is a huge space within the existing high school, and one of the early concepts was, what if you actually created a new gym space, either as an addition or potentially separate from the building, to get maybe some of the athletics into that new facility, and then use the old existing gym space to then start to begin shuffling things around. So one of the concepts that they looked at was a potential addition onto the existing high school that would create a new kind of larger gym that would be able to have the full-size bleachers, that would be able to host MIA playoff events, that type of thing, move things like athletic and the trainer office into there, create a separate lobby with a community entrance. Sorry. And then you'd be able to free up the existing core of the existing gym. And then there's a couple of domino effects that would possibly move. You can move some music spaces into there. You could use the music spaces to move guidance and counseling into those existing spaces. And then you kind of have a whole bunch of other places that could then take on maybe different or larger spaces than what they're in now, for lower square foot costs, because then you're talking about renovating some of those key spaces versus adding on brand new square footage. And then some of the solutions, especially around the science lab, where you're somewhat hemmed in by the existing size of the building, and to go create larger science labs in new square footage could be really expensive. So one of the concepts that TAPE has come up with, and we might see it in a minute, is actually getting rid of some of the built-in casework and things that are in the existing labs, bumping out the size of those labs, taking a few feet out of the hallway without really cramping the hallway, and then using new furniture in those spaces that's flexible. You can set up in a classroom formation or roll them over to the side. Create some sinks along the wall, but not have all built-in type casework like traditional or older science lab might have, and that gives you more square footage in those science labs without really doing a major renovation. So you're spending it in flexible furniture and maybe some updated finishes, but not spending the money of building new square footage with all the things that go with that. So that was kind of the first pass, and the goal was to come up with more concepts kind of along those lines to create that suite of options that then could, maybe there's tiers of options of like what's the first priority, what's the second priority, and how do you group those together from that menu to kind of come up with, this is what we could do for 20 million or 23 or 25. Oh, there you go. So yeah, I'll go back through that. So this was just an example of if you did an addition off the gym, so that's looking at basically the lower, kind of like the locker room entrance now. So you'd have the green space, which is the new gym space with full bleachers on both sides. The upper right corner that's green would be a community entrance that would be available off hours. Obviously, you don't have to go through the main entrance anymore. You do have access across the gym to the corridor of where that exterior door is now, if you want to get into the locker room spaces for team rooms and the fitness areas, of course. The red area would actually be somewhat of a community entrance for Walpole TV, which would be right off of their studio. Again, separate from getting into the school, that could be open separately off hours. And then the light blue and other shade of blue is really like the athletic director trainer offices, so kind of getting those out into the new space. Next slide. And by doing that, you free up the existing gym space, which is the kind of the maroon color in the middle. And the thought is that then you could have a really robust, potentially performing arts area, because the ceiling height of the existing gym is actually very close to what new music rooms are. It's low for a new gymnasium, but it's about 2 feet taller than what they currently design music rooms at to give better sound acoustics. So you could do dedicated music rooms in there, whether it's band or string or chorus, and then you kind of have that square, which is kind of a flexible space. And one of the things they were thinking about is that could be a black box theater, or you could have bleachers that pull out. It could be a small lecture room. The other thought is that's directly below the science wing on the second floor that kind of looks into that space. That could be kind of a flexible, technology, engineering, robotics, AR, VR type lab, and it's connected by that staircase. So again, the adjacencies to science. And then in doing that, the current music spaces in blue become a bigger counseling suite. SPED areas can then move into the counseling spaces. And there's a domino effect of spaces become available, and then you're able to create better and maybe bigger spaces for some of the existing programs without really changing square footage at a much lower square foot cost. So this is one of the examples where TAPE is saying, hey, we could create a new new gym space at a different at a higher square foot cost. We could then address more program at a lower square foot cost and come and cobble all it together for about $23 million. So this is hot off the press. This is kind of the first pass at it, and the goal is to have, you know, another handful of sets of these. Next slide. And the last one is the science wing. So this is really just expanding the existing lab spaces into the hallway slightly to pick up a little bit more square footage, but clearing out the casework to create much more open areas, use some flexible furniture, again, to set up either in a classroom formation or slide them against the wall for labs, and then creating some shared prep spaces between them. Again, very relatively inexpensive solutions that kind of make those labs much bigger and more flexible than they currently are. And obviously refresh the finishes, and then you can fill it with newer technology or whatever out of that budget. So this is kind of an example of the menu options. This is really all that we've created so far, but the goal is to have, you know, a series of these that then will kind of get pieced together into, you know, a total project budget for a group of options. So next step is to continue to do that over the next month or two, with the goal of potentially starting conversations of August, of really starting to maybe narrow those down and put some criteria together and see which options could potentially, you know, meet the needs. And then if ideally, you know, get ready to down to a preferred solution sometime in the early fall, if that's where the district wants to go. That's all I have. And answer some questions in the high school before we go to the middle school.
Questions? Mr. Butler.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think my colleagues would agree that there's no one on this committee more dramatic than me, and as much as I exceedingly love the idea of opportunities for arts and expansion therein, they're now in the old cafeteria. I think as we have heard from this body's limited deliberation, it's important in this meeting and in sort of all meetings where we discuss this to really focus on a consensus emerging, which I believe we have, that this project, which is quite limited in scope to your point, I like your idea. And number one, great job. I mean, you're doing good work, and as you have for all of our other town buildings. But I think number one, the core thrust of this must be STEM in nature. And I think it's good to think about how, with this limited scope, you can cascade some other projects and loop other things in, as well as thinking about the ability to latch something on 5 or 10 years out. But I think we have to, as we sort of begin to make decisions as the eventual sort of final menu of options comes before us, I think I would respectfully ask that science be sort of that real core. And the other thing is, was something really good I heard you say, was talking about the versatility of science spaces. I just happened to be talking to the director of the job I have during the day, whose last position was outfitting the state police crime lab, and he was talking about the same sort of thing. There's no fixed labs. Everything is movable. It's on it's very sophisticated carts, but those rooms are rooms full of plugs, full of Wi-Fi, full of hookups for different things, so that you can move it around. I think 20 years ago, I was one of the first classes in the new science wing, and you had sort of this clunky lab space, but also a clunky regular learning space with, you know, desks and rows of chairs, and everything was sort of jammed in together. And I think I like the idea of, within the spaces we have, looking at areas which can be versatile and flexible. And we've, as a body, begun talking about specific capital needs around kind of consumables for science, and those things are going to be changing out at a very rapid rate. We hope to continue that investment. So I think all those things are good, but I would only ask that when you come before us, I would hope that the options before us will all be really rooted and anchored in that focus for STEM, which was when this body voted on the SOIs to the MSBA. STEM was a huge portion of why we first started looking at the high school. So I think that's important.
Yeah, understood. And I'll add, I forgot to mention, but in the science space that we showed, there were some additional spaces that were kind of flexible, collaborative spaces outside the classroom as well. One of them kind of overlooked that square and the, you know, potential performing arts area that could become an extension of that. And that was something we actually discussed at the working group, was that those rooms then become flexible spaces depending on, you know, any curriculum could get in there, right? Based on how those curriculums are going now. They're just not set up particularly as a chemistry lab or as a bio lab. They have the ability to do whatever. And with the prep rooms, depending on how you stage them, it could be support any curriculum. So that was really, TAPE understands that, and they're definitely focusing on that.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would add, as far as the STEM, I don't know if we have any data on how many young girls, young women are going off to study engineering in college. But it used to be next to none, and now they're half of the engineering students out there. It's really interesting. So that's all I have to say.
Ms. Galvin?
Yeah, I think it is important to try to not be all things to all people. And that's where, I think if we give the message of mainly this is about the STEM area, only because it's the area that has changed the most over time. So I think that that's an important message from us. And yeah, I know like the robotics team has a third of it is women at this point. And that made me think of a couple of things. We have the Plimpton building where, it would be ideal if the robotics program became stronger as a result of this. So how that fits into the whole thing is just something worth thinking about.
Yeah, I should add, they are studying that. So they have the plans of the Plimpton, and that is also in the mix as potential options of either, expanding that building potentially, or incorporating that somehow into the curriculum, whether it's, some dedicated spaces for things like robotics. So that's something that TAPE is looking at as well.
The other thing related to that, I'm also on the tech board of directors. So, if in fact there's a change coming and we might need to be talking to the people at tech, I would just want to know, to give them the heads up of where we're going in terms of that. But
yeah, right now it's just what could that space potentially become, and then very, very preliminary. Yep.
Totally fair. No, that's totally fair. I think you were talking about the gym space. Are you looking at creating 2 floors in there, so that, because I'm thinking about the science labs are right there too. So if you,
one of the original thoughts was that could be a potential, but the existing gym space is actually not a full 2-story space. It's kind of a story and a half,
Really?
believe it or not, with current standards. So yeah, we looked at that. TAPE was looking at that, but you would basically need to redo the structure of the gym to fit full 2 regular height spaces. Because what ends up happening is the headroom height you have, but it's all the mechanicals and everything you might need to support those floors that are typically above the ceiling.
okay.
From a design perspective, those floors are typically about 14 feet, floor to floor, so to speak. And I think the gym is just under 26 feet, something like that. And I think it's 22 feet or 20 feet to the bottom of the current rafter. So it's relatively low from a gym design perspective.
I see.
So that was something that we originally looked into, is that could become a new structural shell, to support a 2-story space and move a lot of program in there.
Right.
And TAPE has somewhat ruled that out, thinking like, let's move the athletics out, move other spaces that could use that volume a little bit better, like music, and then figure out a way to look at other things. But yeah, that was on the original kind of agenda, and I think they've said that that's a bigger effort to structurally make that how it would need to be to support a 2-level space.
Okay. Well, thanks, and thank you for being here, because obviously we want to be clearly involved as this begins to evolve.
Yeah.
So, thanks a lot.
Any other comments? Sean and Carrie?
Yeah, just being in part of the working group, I really commend Brian and TAPE for listening. They've done a good job of listening to that, and some of the feedback that you guys have shared is some of the similar feedback that we've passed along. And it's interesting talking about this project compared to the middle school, where the middle school we were designing really a blank canvas. We had parameters and structure, but it's hard to figure this out, especially like the square footage costs, like Brian was saying, of an addition of classrooms versus an addition of an athletic space. The cost difference is so dramatic. It's interesting to look at moving the athletic space out, and what we can do flexibly there. And one of the things that the teachers had commented is they wanted to stay together as a subject group. So there's ideas that there are spaces spread out for science to be spread out and maybe expand the room size, but they found power in being close together, and that's unfortunately just not a large space. They're kind of boxed in there. So I'm curious to see what the next wave. Brian said they're bringing some more designs, and hopefully, it's next week or whether in a couple weeks after that there'll be some more options. But I don't know. It's not moving as fast as I thought. I mean, I have no scope for the speed anyway. But it's very deliberate, thoughtful, and everybody's doing a good job listening and trying to respond.
And I'll add on to what Sean just said is that in going through some of those kind of domino effects, it's realizing that there's going to end up being available spaces throughout the building potentially that while it's not necessarily a lab space, it is an engineering or a tech space that may or may not necessarily need to be right next to all the other science. It could be, it's an elective that could be off in a different part of the building because it doesn't necessarily have to be supported by the same staff. So those are some things we're looking at, and we definitely talked about some of that future looking, crime lab, AR, VR type lab, curriculum that could fit in some of these spaces that doesn't necessarily need to be right next to the traditional science wing. So that's definitely something that's being looked at.
Just a clarification on the timing. Did I understand correctly, Brian, that we might be in position to ask for an appropriation at this fall's town meeting for the design phase?
That's the way that we have this set up right now. That is, if the district and the town want to move that quickly, the goal would be that you somehow get to a narrowed preferred kind of option, right, with that fits into the budget, addresses the highest priority needs or the most of the highest priority needs. One of the things you have to consider is the phasing of that, like how would that impact the current school and everything, but that would be the ultimate goal, is that you're ready to do that sometime this fall to then go get a design appropriation for, I think if you look at the budget, it's about $2 million or something like that to fully design it and then come back with an actual construction cost. Again, best case scenario. If that doesn't quite work out, then obviously regroup for another option, yeah.
And would that fall kind of under our typical capital request article in the fall, or would it need its own article?
It would need its own, I would say, right?
And through you, Madam Chair, there's also the possibility of using a portion of ARPA, so it may very well be like an amalgamation of a couple of funding sources.
Okay. I'm just asking because I know that they just opened the warrant, but the warrant closes before we officially have a meeting scheduled. Again, so that's why I bring that up, just to be aware.
Through you, Madam Chair, could we ask for like a placeholder? We could ask for a placeholder. I think we may be having another June meeting. We could ask them to hold the space if needed, because it's gonna close in what, August?
I think it's better to be prepared if we're ready to go through with it, that we're, that the path is cleared for it, and if it doesn't work out and we have to push
No
to
action.
spring, then that's what we have to do, but you never think that the prep for town meeting in the fall has to start now, but that's how it's going, so.
I know, I just did my.
Sorry, Mike.
Just did my-
Happy summer, Mike.
I was just gonna say, enjoy,
I was looking at for projects and I was planning the week of Labor Day. I'm like, oh my God, this is
Serious.
depressing, but anyway.
Could I ask Brian, do you mind?
Yes, go ahead.
We're gonna talk about some HVAC requests and capital items that, later on. Could you characterize what the mechanical systems, specifically the HVAC, is like in that building currently? Because we're gonna talk about that as a potential solution through capital.
Yeah, so some of the existing conditions, the boiler plant could use an update. Obviously, some of the existing HVAC and forced air type systems are kind of nearing the end of a useful life in some parts of the building. One of the things that we've also been talking about in this project is trying to limit non-curriculum improvements, so to speak, as much as possible. Obviously, there's some things that are high priority that need to be addressed, things that are outside on the site, and traffic circulation, while yes, are an issue and a priority in some form, they obviously take away from improving curriculum spaces. So it's trying that balancing act, and one of the things that TAP A was thinking about with their engineers is there are some improvements that can be made to the HVAC system in the building on a variety of levels. Upgrades to some of the fire protection systems in certain aspects of the building. That's something you need to think about too, is upgrading that if you add square footage, it all has to tie back. So sometimes that's just not as easy as adding on that square footage. You have to replace modulars or actually a portion of the system. So trying to limit as much of that non-curriculum cost as possible, and one of the solutions is potentially going down a separate route for an HVAC type upgrade. Obviously the new spaces or something like that would be included in, a new building square footage would be included in that cost, but that's potential option.
Thank you.
Ms. Galvin?
Yeah, just one of the comments that came up between when you and Sean were talking made me think, we've talked about reaching out to some of the businesses nearby to sort of create more partnerships with Moderna or a Siemens or a Rolls-Royce for both like internships, but also for just sort of private-public partnerships. And one of the things that the robotics kids have learned to do a lot of is use 3D printers. And I had a conversation with a couple of people about the fact that there are really good paying jobs in like the manufacturing areas. And it might be something that we want to really look into in terms of, I guess you'd call it elective classes that we could offer at the high school, so that kids could really become skilled enough that they could get some of these good jobs that could help a kid who isn't going to be able to pay for college unless they can work their way through it, or if they're not ready for college and they just want a good paying job. So just made me think of, I think there's a lot of thought that we should give to those kinds of elective programs, and I just made myself a note to get going on this reach out to the businesses in the community nearby to see if we could do some sort of a partnership.
And I think that's the goal of having some of those flexible spaces where it's set up with the power cords and the data outlets and the power needs of particular equipment, that if you end up getting that through FF&E or some type of donation or partnership, that the room's able to accept it and it's not rigid that you can't take advantage of that opportunity. So I think some of those spaces that might be left over kind of after those first couple dominoes fall would support stuff like that.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Thank you, Brian. I was part of the initial RFQ, so I think it's great to see how that it's moved, and I think that all the discussion about the flexible spaces is good, and also the phase, right? There's a lot that we could do at the high school, and I think chunking it out and figuring out how do we do this, but then also having the path so that we can do more in the future as money is available. And I think we'll talk about the middle school next, but I think it's also that distinction that we've all sort of talked a little bit about, like we're doing this ourselves versus MSBA, which means different funding, different timeline, different schedule. So if something doesn't happen at town meeting, we can go back. It's still within our control.
Correct.
And we don't have somebody driving us the same way.
That's right.
So.
It's a little more flexible.
Yep.
It's a lot more flexible actually. And there's some advantages and disadvantages, but
Sure.
To be the MSBA project. So especially on a project of this size, sometimes the advantages maybe outweigh that. So it's good.
Great, thank you. So we want to talk about the middle school?
All right, so I'm just going to wing it on the middle school here. So,
And we'll have Mr. Breen chime in.
So middle school is going well. So Fontaine Brothers was brought on as the construction manager. So CM at Risk is the delivery method. So they've been engaged for better part of 2 months now. And they've been working furiously on kind of getting ready with what we're calling early release package 1, which is the enabling phase for this summer, which is really getting the site ready to start thinking about some major construction starting next fall. And that early release package, so the documents associated with that, some of the plans went out 2 weeks ago, and they have bids coming back in, mostly from a site contractor, some tree clearing subs, fencing subs, things of that nature, due back in 2 weeks, week and a half. And the goal is that that would all be leveled out with Fontaine. We'll be reviewing that with TAP A as well to kind of make sure that everything seems to be where we thought it would be budget-wise for this type of work. And then we present that to the building committee on the 28th. And if that is approved, that'll be the first amendment to Fontaine's contract. There'll be a series of amendments as we start to release this work, coming up to a guaranteed maximum price or a GMP by the end of the year, start of next year. So the goal is that subcontractor would come on board and do the enabling phase this summer. We're actually going to put a temporary bus loop or a bus road exit out from behind the bird, kind of where the dumpster is, down behind the dugouts, out to East Street. That ends up, the reason that we're came up with that solution was it limits the amount of work that actually needs to all get done this summer. So instead of trying to rough in that new driveway to East Street, we're going to do a temporary driveway on the southern side of the site. They'll also have a pedestrian walkway, so the kids will still be able to walk from East Street to school. Parents will be coming in the same way that they do now. And there'll be a turnaround loop kind of to the left of the existing parking lot, kind of in front of where the lab space is there. And then there'll be a temporary parking lot to replace the existing drop-off loop parking in the field to the left. So that's all going to happen this summer. They'll put up the construction fence around the rest of the site and start to clear some trees in the island and up in the empty lot. And the goal is that then the site will then be cordoned off for the return to school in August, and folks will be using those temporary circulation routes and parking. The next release package that goes out will be this summer for the full site package. They'll bring on the site contractors to do the rest of the job, and that work is going to start in September. So they'll actually start moving some dirt around inside the fence, start to build the driveway out to East Street, start to kind of level the site inside the fence, and get going on that. The next package that'll go out will be in the fall, will be concrete and steel. And the goal is that foundations will start sometime around Thanksgiving, and steel will start sometime right around the first of the year. The remaining construction documents will be finalized and sent out to bid for all of the other trade contractors at the end of the year, and the goal is by January that we'll actually have a final number. So with the CM, you're able to do these early release packages and start construction in advance, and this is kind of the schedule that we need in order to maintain the overall schedule of being done for opening day of 2024. All along the way, TAP A is still finishing all the design documents. We'll still be doing cost estimates. We have another cost estimate coming up late June, early July. Another check-in with the MSBA at the 60% CD set. And we'll have another check-in with the MSBA at the 90% construction document set. And then we'll be out to bid, like I said, just around the holidays. So overall, things are going well. The construction market's been up and down. It's somewhat stabilized a little bit, but the prices are still high. It just haven't gone up as much. So it'll be interesting to see that first estimate come back. So there will be some work to do to maintain that budget, but that's where we're at. Overall, I think things are going well. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or?
The only thing I would add is that this coming Tuesday is the next community forum and,
Right.
and a piggyback abutters meeting with
Yep.
that. So public should be aware of that. You could check out the website. I don't know if is there a Zoom link through the school website? Or-
School
okay,
website, you can
right.
register for the community forum. The abutters receive notices in the mail, so is every parcel around the site on all sides have been invited, just to kind of get an update on the summer's work, construction in general. Obviously, a lot hasn't changed than what was presented pre-town meeting. It's still the same plan. We just have a little bit more detail now with the CMs on board. We actually will have some more detail along the new driveway to kind of show what we think is relatively a minimal impact to what's out there now from the abutters perspective. So I think they will be somewhat pleased with that, which will be good. We also realized in laying this all out, we've been able to, all of the fields will remain basically in their same condition. A little smaller soccer fields, but everything still meets MIAA, and the baseball fields, everything should be in operation for next season as well. So everything seems to be working as planned.
Excellent. Sean?
So, did you say that is the abutters meeting the same as the community forum?
It's going to be, the abutters meeting is after the community
Oh, okay.
forum. Community forum is going to be 6:30 to 7:30, and the abutters meeting is going to be 7:30 to 8:30. Separate meetings. Yep.
Ms. Calvin?
So are they Zoom meetings?
They're both Zoom meetings.
They're both Zoom meetings.
Cafe will be presenting along with the landscape architect and as well as Fontaine. So talk through a little bit the design, talk through a little bit about the site plan. Fontaine will be talking through the summer work, and then a general timeline that we just discussed for the upcoming year.
And I'm thinking of two people that are town meeting members that live pretty close to it, but may not be considered direct abutters. How would they get to be part of the neighborhood meeting if they wanted to?
They can attend the community forum. It's going to
Yep.
be almost the exact same presentation. They could also email the project team through the middle
Okay.
school's website
Yep.
if they'd like to be invited to the abutters meeting. We
And
could
just
send
because
them a link.
sometimes those are the same people that get questions asked of them.
And obviously, if they find out from their neighbors, they can reach out to us and we can get them the link.
Okay, good. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Brian, for coming.
Great,
by.
no
Yeah,
problem.
appreciate it.
Thanks for
Very
the update.
helpful.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy your summer if this is the last one.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, the first order of new business is the ratification of the Memorandum of Agreement. Mr. Frisha, would you like to fill us in on the, it's between what, the AFS-CME Council 93, Local 1957 Secretary and Clerical Unit.
So we have a one-year agreement that's highlighted in your packets with all the details. I don't know if, do you want me to walk you through the details of the agreement, or I think I could just characterize the negotiations overall. We reached a consensus for a one-year agreement with the idea that we would review comparable towns and see where our secretaries in particular, how they compare to other towns in the area. We'd like to take some time to do that, and that's going to, would be better served with a one-year agreement with this analysis taking place next year. So the secretarial unit was in agreement with that, and the agreement details are before you in the packet.
Ms. Galvin?
I would make a motion to agree to the one-year contract as presented this evening.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
All
Yeah.
those,
Work.
yeah, thank you
To
for your
both
work on that one.
groups.
You're welcome.
All those in favor? Stand opposed? Opposed passes 600. Okay, next order is the bullying report.
I will take that for Dr. Hahn. He left me some very good notes, so I'll give you some information. So before I report out on the bullying harassment data from this school year, I thought it would be useful to take this opportunity to review a couple of things, just briefly review the definition of bullying and summarize our protocols and remind all community members where they can find more information about the Walpole Public Schools Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan. So bullying, just as a reminder, is defined according to Mass General Law. It's actually Chapter 71, Section 370. As a repeated use by one or more students or a member of a school staff of a written, verbal, or electronic expression or physical act or gesture, or any combination directing at that target that causes physical or emotional harm to the target or damage to the target's property, places the target in reasonable fear of harm to himself or herself or damage to his or her property, creates a hostile environment at the school for that target, infringes on the rights of the target at that school, or materially and substantially disrupts the education process or the orderly operation of the school. This definition is what our school administrators use when receiving an allegation of bullying to determine if the case constitutes bullying. When anyone makes an allegation of bullying or harassment, our administration team uses our bullying intervention procedures to complete a full investigation. To be clear, even if an incident is not found to be bullying, there is still communication with the victim, witnesses, aggressors, school staff, and caregivers. Oftentimes, there are still consequences for the aggressor, and schools still continue to consider, they will consider a safety plan when it's appropriate at each case. Details of our protocols can be found on our district and school websites under the WPS Bullying Prevention and Intervention Plan link. And Mary can include that also in the minutes of this meeting. The link also includes an anonymous reporting resource for all stakeholders if they are witnesses or are victims of bullying or harassment. Students and families can also report bullying or harassment to any school staff member, who are then required to report this information to their supervisor. Just on to the data. You can see the 4 years here. We anticipated an increase in our allegations and confirmed cases of bullying for this school year as in compared to last school year because, as we know, of the increase of how many days students were in school versus learning remotely. While we did have allegations of online bullying in our middle schools last year, we believe our elementary and high school numbers were significantly impacted by COVID hybrid learning, and allegations were much lower. For example, our 2021-22 school year data is more consistent with 2018 and 2019, and 2019, 2020 school years, when we started recording this data, with the exception of our elementary schools, which demonstrate a large reduction in bullying allegations this year. That's why I thought it was important to kind of start tracking and using the 4-year data from when we started. We believe an emphasis on our SEL, our social emotional learning curriculum at the elementary schools, played an important role in reducing conflicts with students. However, you're going to remember this is a small snapshot in time, and we will be working with our counseling and administrative staff to further analyze all behavioral data. The middle school data has remained consistent over the last 4 years. Both middle schools have an SEL task force that review SEL curriculum and programming to prevent and reduce bullying. Our administrative team is also analyzing school discipline data to review any concerns for bias. In addition, many of the allegations stem from incidents that tend to occur during unstructured time. We've discussed this before. As a result, we have looked to increase supervision on the playgrounds, in the hallways, and school property during dismissal. Our high school allegations and confirmed cases are consistent with the 2018-2019, and then as you see, our 2019-2020 school years. While we never want any cases of bullying, our numbers and allegations of allegations and confirmed cases are low. Next year, the district would like to provide more parent and family support to help families navigate online resources, cell phone use, and social media. Preventing bullying requires the work of schools, families, and outside stakeholders to come together to support our children. That's your update. If anybody has any questions or comments, you can find the DESE one that mirrors this. That's online. The report that comes out.
Questions or comments? Ms. Denizio?
Thank you for this information. I think it's really helpful to see multiple years of data at once, so we have some context. But I'm curious about when you say that our numbers are low, are we comparing them to numbers in other districts, or how are we?
Yeah, I can double check with Dr. Hahn, but he does. He compares them with other districts. We look and compare them. And it's a reminder, like to your point, Carrie, that just because like there's an allegation of bullying, the low number might be bullying, but it might also be something else, right?
Yeah.
You could have it as, it could be a fight, it could be assault, it could be, there's a number of things. But yeah, when you look at these, I think in comparison,
I mean, they don't strike me as particularly high.
No, not at all.
But I would just be curious, like, it would be useful to see how we compare to other places. And I think my other question or comment would be, like, the number of allegations is significantly higher at the middle school level than at the elementary and the high school level. And yet the number of substantiated cases is not significantly higher. So I guess I'm wondering if anybody is looking at what type of situations are occurring that are leading to these allegations of bullying, and is there a common theme or a common thread of a certain type of behavior, or any kind of pattern where we could say, like, okay, there's maybe possibly a proactive intervention that we could design with our middle schoolers that would reduce this particular type of behavior that is being perceived as potential bullying.
Yeah,
behavior.
all good points. I think too, for looking at data, it's important, and we've done this in the past and we'll do it again, look at the time of the year. Is it September versus January, with the education piece in it, after they have the education piece. I also think too, you know, how good of a job that we're doing. You can look at the middle school maybe for an example of being transparent to wanting people to report, because when you create those anonymous online and you encourage people to report, your allegations will go up.
Sure.
So we have to look at, and I think to your point is, you know, disaggregating that data when you look at the reporting.
Right. Is it that there's one thing that is happening that is being interpreted as bullying, and we just need some education around whether it is or isn't bullying, that it still represents some kind of conflict or some kind of
Correct.
problem. And we need to figure out, is there a way that we can address that root cause?
Exactly.
And what was my other thought? I'm losing it. Oh, grade level. I'd be interested in seeing it disaggregated by grade level as well.
And we do have the data that we keep, grade level and also where it occurs. We can give that to you.
Yeah.
And then also looking at the number, because you might have a number of people making they might witness the same incident.
Right.
So the numbers can come up,
Right,
so we
that's true.
disaggregate
That's a
that
good point.
too.
And I think too, like, you mentioned how a lot of these things tend to happen in unstructured times, and, it's not surprising the numbers went down last year, not only because of reduced number of days in school, but also reduced number of transitions in unstructured times, because students were pretty well contained within their cohorts and their classrooms, and there weren't as many opportunities for unsupervised or unstructured
That's a good point.
transitional time. And I think that just it's a reminder of how often that is the place for this.
And just about allegations that you brought it up, we've always kept that. We feel like that's important, not just bullying, but the allegations. And for the last, few years, DESE had indicated that they were going to collect those allegations of bullying. They haven't yet, but we're still collecting that data, because that's our commitment to safe and supportive schools. So right now also it's really important that some people may not know this, that when you look at those confirmed cases, the state only reports bullying if it leads to suspension. So that's it's a different discussion. They said that they're going to change it, but at the state, it hasn't happened.
I had one more thought, which is, I know that when we were doing safe schools and we were reviewing policies and procedures, and we talked a lot about communicating what the procedure is for a bullying investigation. And I know that during remote learning, we used a lot of online tools like Screencastify and things to share information. And I just think for some of these procedural policy things, there might be some value in creating a Screencastify with one of our administrators to say, here's what you can expect if you file a request, or you allege bullying, if you initiate an investigation, where we walk people through the process so they know what to expect.
Yeah, that's it.
Similarly, if somebody alleges bullying against your student, what you can expect throughout that process, I think could be really, really useful for families, because I'm sure it sounds really intimidating regardless of what end of it you're on as a parent, and it just might help everyone to have a better understanding of what we're talking about when we're talking about a bullying investigation.
Yeah, good point. We'll bring that up.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Carrie, especially after COVID, when we're now back in school. It's finding all those policies and figuring out how to do all the things we used to do before COVID. So that's a really good point. Ms. Galvin?
Two things, but one is that topic came up even as we were talking with teachers recently, that they want parents, school committee members, and teachers to work together around some of the things that collectively they're seeing concerning these types of things. And my other point is, specifically, we're talking tonight about allegations and confirmed bullying, but many issues are not technically bullying, but they're conflicts, and they're challenging episodes in a child's life, regardless of, it's not so much you checked off the box that says it's bullying. It's that somehow, if we can take this next step so that we do work more effectively as school, family, and students on, and education is always the key. So I think there's some interesting room for improvement there.
And I think that it would be helpful too to show what all of these conflicts resulted in. Because everything that's tracked will say, you know, whether it be a safety plan or these students met to do, you know, restorative piece, to know how, you know, what the outcome was is helpful.
Related to that, I think that the old-fashioned way of looking at it was, if the student wasn't suspended, then nothing happened.
Correct.
And that is not the way it is right now. And, you know, there are some really good consequences, for lack of a better word, that are meant to teach a student. You know, because it's hard to grow up, and you're gonna make mistakes. And it doesn't mean that you're, you know, in the bad person jail for the rest of your life. But it's about, you know, helping them learn.
Exactly.
Other questions? John?
So, I'm excited to hear the potential for some community and especially parent community-wide workshops or, you know, lecture, whatever the format is on that, because, you know, we are, you know, wherever it falls in there, you know, we're dealing with our students on a daily basis of, you know, what they're hearing and how it's making them feel and what's their response. And you know, knowing whether it's what the school's procedures are, like Carrie mentioned, or just how to navigate that better with your kids and as a parent and with other parents. You know, all of that is important, and especially mentioned the phone piece and social media. You know,
Once you learn something, then figure out something else pops up. Right?
yeah,
Right?
yeah. It doesn't matter the age, unfortunately.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the update, Dr. Rowe. Move into your superintendent report.
Barbara? You want to do that? Okay. Sure. You want to do, or you want to do?
We can do yours.
All right.
Roll right into that.
Roll right in. So you have that set up. So just a very brief COVID update. Last week, we had 27 cases. This week, so far on Thursday, we're down to 12. So we're starting to see a decrease. The positivity rate was a little over 7%, which was down from 10% the week before. So that's good news. So we're now approaching the end of the school year. As we all know, the last day for our preschoolers is June 16th, and the last day for our K-11 student is next Friday. I really continue to be impressed with all that our students have accomplished. It was great to have many of them back this year at our school committee meetings to be recognized. I think we all miss that. And just to really see their achievements. We continue to be grateful for the staff for their dedication and hard work, and we appreciate the partnership with our families and the Walpole community. We do ask families to please check for any updates from their child's principals regarding anything in terms of the last days of school and the summer. As was mentioned from our student report, on Sunday, the Walpole community celebrated our 148th commencement to honor Walpole High School's graduating senior class of 2022. I was at my son's graduation, but I was able to catch the graduation on YouTube, so it was absolutely wonderful. I just want to thank all the staff and volunteers who make that day such a special occasion. We're so grateful for their hard work to ensure that it's a really great day, and I need to give again a special thank you to the Walpole Police Department and the Walpole Fire Department for their support with the parade, because you know, it can't do it without them. And then most importantly, thank you to the class of 2022. Their high school years, as we know, were filled with challenges, but I really feel that their resiliency and their perseverance and really their ability to come together just did not go unnoticed. We appreciate all their hard work, all their contributions, and we wish them well as they embark on a journey that's filled with these, you know, opportunities and new challenges. It's exciting. And finally, I'd like to congratulate our amazing 2022 retirees. We have a small group of them, and I would like to recognize these dedicated individuals for their many years of service to the Walpole Public Schools and thank them for enriching the lives of our students, and we wish them a very happy and healthy retirement. And I think if you look up there, we'll I'm just gonna read their names as we're able to give them their 30 seconds of fame. So we have Ann Josie, who's our custodian at Elm Street School, who's retiring. Carolyn Kelly retired, if you remember her. She's the was the math coach at Old Post Road School. Next is Dan Smith. He's the custodian at Walpole High School. He'll be retiring in September, so we want to recognize him. We have Mr. Greg Mayer, who is the band and music teacher at Bird Middle School. He'll be retiring. And then we also had Jane Lazaro. She was our media tech over there at, I think it says Fisher, but Fisher, yeah, at Fisher. And Jim DiTilio, many of you know him, the technology person at Bird Middle School, but also very instrumental in the plays at the high school and Walpole Media. Miriam McCann, the guidance secretary at Walpole High School. And then we also have Susan Mangano, who was our Daniel Feeney Preschool ESP. And then Kim Oliveira, she was our kindergarten teacher at Old Post Road. She joined us in 1991. So, yeah, it's been a good way. And last but not least, we have Kathy Garvin, who is our head nurse and has been with us since 1999. And we are going to miss all of them, and congratulate them on the job well done. And that's my report.
Excellent. Questions or comments? No, thank you for helping to lead us through this school year, and to all the people who their many years of service.
Yes.
So now to old business, the ARPA update.
So I've provided a slightly updated version of the document we shared last time we were here.
Okay.
And specifically capital, we've added a couple of items on there that I wanted everyone to be aware of. I'll wait till the document. So the last two items on capital are two significant projects. Number one is number three, actually, under capital, is a conversion of 4 elementary media centers into STEM labs with the hiring of our 4 new STEM teachers. We are customizing what was once our media spaces into STEM labs. The work has begun already. We're using resources that we have from savings within our own budget to start these projects. But unfortunately, given COVID and given just the supply chain issues that we're dealing with, it's going to take a while to get the furniture and equipment in those spaces. So we're already making accommodations with what we have in those spaces to begin the year. But we would like to get all that in October, November, have all those new furniture, flexible chairs and seating and tables that move around that allow for collaboration. All of that will come together around October, November with our new teachers, being able to take advantage of that new equipment. And obviously flexibility and collaboration are the key aspects of those important parts of those spaces. Number 4 is the science equipment at the elementary and the high school. I'm sorry, the prior one, number 3, was $400,000 was the request for that capital. And then number 4 is the science equipment for elementary and high school of $100,000. I think we all heard Brian Jarvis speaking about the high school, a very limited budget, not going to be able to buy a lot of the things that we are going to benefit from in our middle school with a much more robust budget. So we are looking to systematically take on some of these challenges. We talked about HVAC prior, introducing HVAC before the building project's done. And I think the science equipment fits that same bill. At the high school in particular, building out those spaces and making sure that we have that modern state-of-the-art equipment available for the new high school renovated space as well as the original spaces, and really upgrading, bringing in new advanced technologies. And at the elementary, we continue to build out our science program and try to advance the programs and equipment that we have. And a portion of that money would be allocated to those science existing programs and curriculum in those buildings. And that was, as I said, $100,000. Sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't go that far these days, especially with inflation. So those are the 2 new items on the list. The existing ones are what we talked about at the last meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have about either ARPA funding or capital funding. If you want to provide an update of the ARPA meeting.
Oh, sure. Through you, Madam Chair. We did have a great meeting in this room a couple days ago with the Select Board, just for the edification of the public. There are $45 million worth of ARPA requests. There are $5 million of ARPA funds available for the town, which is a magnitude of 9. So obviously, there's a lot of discussions happening. Chairman O'Neill did ask us to think very long and hard on what the priorities of our requests would be. There was, excuse me, there was a lot of discussion talked from the Select Board's perspective about looking at projects which benefit the greatest number, which we were quick to point out. A lot of school kids in town. There's a vast swath of the community is affected, and it just looks like, I think we said a little bit earlier today that ARPA funding, one-time additional school direct COVID monies, and capital funds are all going to have to be cobbled together to achieve some of our goals here, and many of these things are multi-year plans, but we're lucky if these funds are not available. This list would probably be what, Mike, a 10-year plan or something of that nature. So.
Thanks, Bill. Questions, Ms. Galvin?
Mike, I'm looking at it says conversion of 4 elementary media centers. Can you tell us, I was always picturing that part of the media center would still look like a media center and part of it would be a STEM lab. Is that the way you're proceeding?
That is the case.
Okay.
That's a good question. I would highlight one particular thing. So we're not removing books.
Right.
Consolidating them, putting them on bookshelves that have wheels, so they can be reconfigured and work within the needs of these new spaces.
Just wanted to be clear.
We're not getting rid of the books.
You never know how sometimes stories go, so just wanted to, yeah. Okay, great. That's a good answer. Thank you.
Mr. Ahern?
Is the 400,000, is that additional to what's already been started? Is that what you mentioned?
It would be supplemental to, it's at this point, we don't know exactly what we want to do with the space. It's evolving as we go. Those teachers, as they arrive here and start to think about and develop and finalize the curriculum, which is being finalized now, I think we'll get a better sense of what types of equipment they're looking for. But if you divide it over 4 media centers, 25,000 goes pretty quickly for that equipment. But it is going to be necessary. We're using savings and we're using things of that sort, but that will only get us so far.
Gotcha. Is there any concern about not kicking the year off with the equipment already in place and potentially having a delay based upon how capital funding comes in, and providing the resources for the teachers to get to know the stuff before, working with it and sharing with the students?
So I think we'll have a good basis for the rollout of these new programs. We'll have equipment, we'll have things to use. It won't be perfect, it won't be as flexible or as functional as some of the new equipment will be. But I talked to a few of the principals today, and they were confident that what we have in our media centers are tables and chairs, and we can make that work. But over time, we'll be able to really move these spaces forward and bring in that new state-of-the-art technology that we're so looking forward to getting.
Okay.
I don't know if does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know what I was looking for in an answer either. I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think it's
is
to
all.
make sure that, like you had mentioned before about like being thoughtful and deliberate. I mean, you could be quick and say, oh, this is gonna be ready and we can order it and it'll be here in 4 weeks, or we really want this and it might not be delivered until November, but we know
Yeah.
that's what we want.
Yeah, and that's the thing these days anyway. I mean, even if you placed the order today, I mean,
Good luck, yeah.
I placed a couple orders today and they were like January maybe. That's not.
The one thing I'll add is we're taking the time to do design work through our vendors. So they're sending us proposals for our spaces. They have the dimensions. So we're taking the time to be creative, thoughtful, and have designs in front of us, but that takes, a month. And then at that point, we decide, okay, what do we want? We place the orders, and now you're 10 to 15 weeks out. But the alternative is not, to rush it is wasteful at times, and we don't want to do that.
Right, 'cause, I mean, this is a long-term change that we're looking for to have great impact, so, I mean, like you said, deliberate makes sense.
A work in progress.
Work in progress, I like that.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Frischel, for your update. The next order of business is subcommittee activity. So we did have a special ed subcommittee meeting on Tuesday, where we got an update on the middle school audit, and I think it was a lot of good information and some information that'll sort of that we can bring into the
Yeah,
combined
it's in
middle
draft
school.
form, and I
Yep.
think once we get it in final form, we'll share it with everybody. Very good. It'll give us some food for thought. Exactly.
Yep.
The combined school. Thank you.
Any other subcommittee activities? Good. Citizens' comments. So you please identify yourself, and then, according to our bylaws or our agenda, you have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Joanne Barrett. I am here speaking as a mother of a special ed student who they thought would never get a high school diploma, but she's getting hers Wednesday because Walpole paid a significant amount of money for her to go to a residential program. This is a picture of my daughter, and I want to just pass out so you can look quickly at the yearbook that she just got.
Thank you.
The thing that's important about this is, I went to Plimpton School when we went home for lunch. I went to Bird Middle School when it was called East Junior High, and we had double sessions because they were making West Junior High. And I graduated from Walpole 49 years ago. But I moved back when I had adopted 2 children as a single woman from Russia, and I brought them into the school system. When the kids are little, my son actually went to Tri-County and is now a Marine in reserves. He's a carpenter, has been on this old house and has done very well. My daughter has a lot of special needs, probably has some fetal alcohol from being adopted from Russia, not knowing. She came home at 2. She went through Fisher's inclusion program. Then she went to Bird Middle School when Dr. Goff was there. My son had Dr. Goff's husband as one of his favorite teachers, so we sort of all know. And when my daughter hit middle school, things changed for people with special ed. And it was hard for me in Walpole because a lot of the special ed parents had kids that were very physically challenged. That was really not my daughter's case. It was more processing issues. It was more trying to get a handle on things. When she hit the high school, I wasn't happy with the department, the special ed. Then it was sort of different group than it's there now, and had to go out and find my own school for her to go to. And after a couple of schools that didn't work out well, she ended up going to Ivy Street in Brookline, which is a residential program, and she was there for 5 years. And just, unfortunately, turned 22 on April 1st, and the way everything goes is done. Now she's in adult service, and there's a whole new thing going on. But I did want to say that I probably gone over 3 minutes, that I certainly appreciate so much the support that Walpole did when I know that the school, I know Walpole didn't pay for everything for the school, but it's $257,000 a year. 5 years, we're talking over $1 million. And it's not a lot of students, but my daughter was not thought to be able to graduate. She's getting a diploma next week. She's now in a residential house and probably will be living on her own soon, in a supplemental housing. And it's all because of the support she got that was so important. One person, but one person that's now part of the community. And so I just want to say, you probably get a lot of people that come and complain as parents, but I'm very happy with the support that the Walpole School Committee departments have given my family. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Like you said, it is not often that we hear those types
Correct.
of comments, so we really appreciate you coming.
And so when you're talking about budgeting, my nephew is also Ben Barrett, and I keep saying to him, It's important, you know, it's important. People think it's a lot of money to go to different schools and different options. But if you're making a difference in one person's life, it's priceless. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations to your daughter.
All right, now back to the mundane. Warrants. Would you like to read the warrants?
Yes, if someone would. I'd like to vote to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packet. They are 222048 and 222049.
Second.
Motion by Sean, second by Carrie. All those in favor? Abstained? 600.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrant for the amount listed in your packet. That is 2248PA.
Second.
Motion by Sean, second by Carrie. All those in favor? This is 600. Someone like to take the donations?
Excuse me. I'll make a motion to accept the following gifts and donations. System-wide from Rockland Credit Union, chairs for retirees in the amount of $500. To Walpole High School, from various donors for the Michael Fokker Memorial Fund, $1,259. And to Fisher Elementary from Bay State Textiles Recycling in the amount of $65.50.
Second.
We have a motion by Carrie, second by Sean. All those in favor? 600. Someone like to take the minutes?
Through you, Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the May 26, 2022 school committee meeting minutes and the May 26, 2022 executive session meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Bell, second by Carrie. All those in favor? This is 600. Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would make a motion, if you so declare, to enter into executive session pursuant to Purpose 3 and pursuant to Chapter 39, subsection 23B, to enter into executive session to discuss union negotiations, an open session being not, what?
Union and non-union?
Union and non-union.
Yeah.
Negotiations, so Purpose 2 and 3. An open session being detrimental to our deliberations. So say I declare.
I declare.
Excellent.
And then we would come back for the purpose.
Solely for the purpose of
Solely for
adjournment.
the purpose of adjournment. Full the committee? Ms.
Yeah.
Denisio?
Yes.
Mr. O'Hara?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Green? Ms. Galvin?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
And Kristen Cyrix says yes.